one away. There are three types of edits that can be performed on a string. Insert a character, remove a character, or replace a character. Given two strings, write a function to check if they are one edits away. So the two first examples have remove edit, and the two last ones have replace. But the last one has two replaces, so that's why it returns false. Now, we want to detect whether a string has an insert, a remove, or a replace. So let's say our string 1 is pales and string 2 is pale. So going from pales to pale is actually one remove operation, and going from pale to pales is one insert operation into the string 1. So we can conclude from these two examples that actually insert and remove are actually one thing, are one kind of operation. So for this algorithm, we first want to check whether the length of both, we want to basically get the length of both strings, and the reason for that is that whenever we are one remove or insert away, the difference in lengths of the two input strings is not greater than 1. So if we have greater than that, we want to return false, so they're not one edit away. Now, if the lengths are equal, then we might be able to make those two input strings the same as each other by doing one replace operation. So if the lengths were equal, we want to check for whether check for the replace condition. So for this, we will loop through the both strings and like try to match the respective characters and count the mismatches and differences in the characters of both strings. Else, if the length of two strings were not equal and also was not more than 1, like if the length of two strings were not equal, we want to check for insert and remove. But how are we going to do that? I think we first need to find out which one is the bigger or larger string, and we want to create a loop and remove each character in the bigger string at a time in each iteration, and then compare the coded string, the result string, with the shorter string. If the two resulted strings were equal, then we would conclude that we are one insert or remove away, and if not, we will conclude that we are not one edit away. So for this, the worst runtime is O of n, and yeah. So let's get back to our code editor. Our console is working great. Now let's write out the function. So it's a public static boolean, and we call it is one away, and it takes two strings as an input. Now first we want to check the length of two strings. I want to get the absolute value of their differences, and if it was greater than 1, we will return false. Now let's pseudocode and write out the rest of the functionality of our code. So if both strings were equal in length, we want to loop through both strings and compare respective characters. If more than 1 did not match, return false. And for insert or remove, we want to find the bigger string, the larger string, and then loop through the larger string and remove a char at a time, and compare the resulted string to the shorter one. and if the resulted string was equal to the shorter one, we will return true. So let's first store both lengths, both string lengths, in a variable so that we don't have to calculate it each time we call it, and that we have access to it in the rest of this function. So first we are checking for the replace condition. So we will create a loop that goes through every character in both strings. Since the lengths are equal in this case, it doesn't matter we loop through which of the strings. Now we are comparing to see whether the characters from the string 1 and string 2 match up. If they don't match up, we add 1 to the variable called unmatched chart count. And if the unmatched chart count is greater than 1 at any given time, we will return false. Otherwise, for that condition, for the equal length condition, we will return true. Now let's do the same for the not equal length condition. In this case, what we are doing is that we are checking to see whether, like, we are trying to figure out which one is the bigger string. So let's actually export the definitions to the top. Right, so now we know which one is the bigger string at any given time. Now let's create a loop to go through the larger string, and let's remove a character at a time. But strings are immutable in Java, so how can we actually... We don't have any method for removing a character from a string in Java. So how can we do that? Do we need a string builder? Sure, I think we can do that with string builder. But let's see. Let's not create a new variable, and let's see if we can use our knowledge of strings by itself. So apparently we can create a substring, and that basically is the same as this method for removing a character from a string is actually the same as delete method in string builder. So let's do that. We will first create a substring from the 0th index to ith index, and then concatenate it with another substring from i+1 index to the last index. And then we'll call it a string we'll call it cutted string. And then if cutted string was the same as shorter string, we will return true, otherwise we will return false. There is one error in this code. We will come back later and try to fix it. So I think our code is now ready to test. So let's create a variable called result, and then let's call is1away function and pass it pale and pales and store the result in that variable. Alright, for this we are getting false, which is not what we expected. So let's see whether our code is working correctly. Let's put some print statements to see whether they are being reached, like if our code is actually reaching certain points. So we are doing it right, and we are reaching a case where pale and pale are generated. So why aren't we returning true for that condition? So the return false that we are getting is actually at line 121, and so Apparently we would have to use equals method for strings in Java. So yeah, it's now fixed after fixing line 116. Now we're getting true for that and false for this. And let's try out some more examples, and it seems to be working fine. Cool.